Good morning, Bitcoiners. The sun is clearly up, so bright. Bitcoin is running despite the trouble, despite the price collapse. It's not looking good. But here we're going to enjoy our coffee and talk about why we're on the brink of a Bitcoin golden age. Why all the craziness of yesterday is great. Things probably couldn't be better. We couldn't be closer to major change. And I'm going to explain it today by talking first about this concept of synchronicity. So everything I'm about to say is sort of related to simulation theory and an ancient art in China called the I-ching. Does anyone know what the I-ching is? Does anyone know what I-ching is? I-ching? Yeah, so we got West Coast Boots saying, oh man, I love I-ching. Great. If you don't know what I-ching is, have a look at The Man in the High Castle. That's how I learned about it. Nolan, you scared me. I forgot. I had already opened the tab. Unfamiliar. Yeah, so The Man in the High Castle is a Philip K. Dick book, and this is how I learned about it. I read that book in, I don't know, 20 years ago or something like that. And they made an Amazon show about it, which I recommend. I only watched the first season, but they got the first season pretty accurate. They became really creative with everything afterwards, but the actual first season resembles almost exactly what is going on in the book, The Man in the High Castle. Philip K. Dick, if you didn't know, wrote the story for Blade Runner. It was called Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? He wrote the story for Minority Report. So he was a really famous sci-fi author and is behind some of the most important ideas in science fiction. So the I-ching is an ancient Chinese mathematical prediction tool. I-ching basically means change machine or prediction machine. And of course, it was laughed at for many years when Westerners had contact with China at first. Oh, this is ridiculous! It actually works with a bag of sticks, right? And you throw the sticks. There's short sticks and long sticks. And in the end, you know, they had this idea that the I-ching could explain all the world, and you can explain absolutely everything in the universe with the I-ching. And of course, people thought it was hilarious. Ha 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 ha. But along comes modern science and modern psychology. And Carl Jung was one of the first people to start giving a lot of credibility to the I-ching. And he was using it in some of his models. But more importantly, the most convincing part of I-ching happened when computers were invented. And we finally created binary code and we started to digitize the world into ones and zeros. So it turns out that the I-ching and the broken sticks, small and large, and the randomness of it all, because that's what you do. You basically throw these sticks on the ground, pick them up in an order, and you're able to divine what's going to happen next from it, right? So sounds crazy, right? Sounds crazy. Well, it turns out that the binary language of computers is identical to what is happening with I-ching. It was the first binary numeracy system. So I-ching actually dates back to about 1500 BC or something. We don't know who wrote the original stuff. Confucius became a huge fan and supporter and contributed a lot to it. That's where we see to this day the this Tau symbol. That is the I-ching right there, black and white. It's the binary nature of things, right? So in this world, everything is black and white. And you can say, well, there's shades of gray in the real world. Sure, but any gray will look darker if it's near a dark color, and any gray will look lighter if it's near a light color. So the idea is that you're being pulled in these opposites at all times, and meaning only comes from having an opposite. So there is no light without dark. There is no positive without a negative, right? So that's the basic framework. And then in the end, because computer science was based on this stuff, folks said, well, there actually might be some validity to it, right? But things go further, right? Because the whole concept of synchronicity starts coming up. And here's what we learned. Here's what we learned. So I'll just read this. The I-ching hexagrams also map onto DNA. Oh, they sure do. Yeah. And if you take, don't forget, if you take the symbol here and move it this way, it is the double helix, right? So if you take this and actually shift it just a little bit, the I-ching turns into the double helix, which you'll see, you know, throughout all ancient civilizations, right? There's double helix. If you go back to the earliest Sumerians on the temples they built in Iran and Persia. If you go back to the oldest things we know, you'll see a double helix there, right? You'll see a double helix. There's double helixes all over the pyramids and all that stuff, right? So the I-ching is really concerned about this concept of synchronicity. And one of the great examples that Jung always used was the following. He believed this is one of the great ways to assuage anxiety, right? That I-ching is actually an anti-anxiety framework. So he had a patient, and most of his patients were super rich, right? Because he was, a guy who was sort of at the edges of what's going on in the world and was experimenting and was kind of a celebrity. Jung, I'm talking about. So he had this one lady full of anxiety, didn't know what to do with her life and all these things. And she came to Jung one day with a dream, and it was about a golden beetle. Right? And she's telling Jung about all this golden beetle stuff. And he's listening, but suddenly, out of nowhere, an actual golden beetle flies into the room and lands right between them. And Jung said, what is this, right? And now the beetle itself was not endemic to that part of the world. It shouldn't have been there at that time of the year and all these things. It was just a super impossible scenario. And right away, the woman sort of clicked, right? She saw synchronicity, saw meaning in synchronicity, and was able to break her anxiety from just that alone, right? So everything I'm about to say, because we're going to talk about SBF now and FTX and everything that's going on. If you saw the episode last night on Bitcoin Magazine, we covered the election. So we covered a bit of this, but I'll give it a more succinct explanation. Because looking at synchronicity, looking at coincidences, looking at things that happen at the same time is part of the I-ching. Right, we're able to divine some meaning out of these synchronistic events. So what I'm about to say is not a cause and effect criminal indictment of SBF, although I think he's going to have some, jail stuff coming up, unfortunately for him. But it will actually underline, I think, what's going on in some aspects of U.S. politics, and will actually, I think, suggest the kind of change that's about to happen. That it might look bad currently, but if you look at it from this frame, I think we just cracked open a huge box and we got huge insight to what's holding us back. And we've actually created a shortcut to get to the future. So here's what it looks like. So now remember, I'll just give you a bit of my background for what was going on at the time. Let's go back to October and November 2020, the last time the US was saturated with the spin and psyops of an election, right? At that time, I'm working with Kraken, and my job at Kraken is as a strategist. So I'm part of a small little team looking at edge cases, looking at things we can do, looking at advantages, looking at ways to make money, obviously, right? So, and I report directly to the CEO. I do not report to product. I don't report to anybody else, right? We're there as a crack team to protect the CEO from bad ideas and to help filter out good ideas and bad, and to suggest things that would require the boss to be involved because they have some form of risk or pivot, or they just require leadership and direction, right? So coming up to the election, and I'm saying, well, I don't think this election is going to look very definitive. So we're back in 2020, right? I'm in Brooklyn. I'm getting mailed ballots every day, right? I got like 5 ballots in that box. I can't even vote. I'm not American, right? I'm not registered to vote. None of those things, but I'm getting ballots, right? My little children are getting ballots. Everybody in my building is getting ballots, right? Now, this is COVID time, right? It's COVID time, so I'm not too worried about it, but I'm saying this is happening across the country. And my guess is just simply that we're not going to have clean results, right? So that's all I'm saying. And I'm still thinking as a media person, because I had been at CoinDesk before. And if you didn't know what we did to make CoinDesk, it was a simple thing. We invented the price of Bitcoin, the reference price of Bitcoin, because no one knew how to report on Bitcoin in the early days, 2013, 2014. And so I was able to go on all the fake news and CNN and CNBC and Fox News because CoinDesk was simply the first reference for Bitcoin in the world. So all the fake news would have to cite our name. So they ended up citing me all the time. They'd say, according to Nolan Bowerly at CoinDesk and da-da-da-da-da. And it was no brilliance on our part. We were just easy to use in a sentence. It was easy for the Wall Street Journal to talk about us, and it was easy for the New York Times, and everybody else who was quoting us because we had the Bitcoin price index, and it was just a simple average of prices, spot market in Tokyo, spot market in Hong Kong, spot market in London, spot market in New York, and we just blended it and averaged it. There was no weighted volumes at the time because it was too easy to game, right? We used Bitfinex, Coinbase, Kraken. I forget who we used, crypto. I forget who we used in England, but it was, maybe blockchain.com. I don't remember whose volume we used. Anyway, we just took the spot prices and we blended them, and it was the simplest trick, right? It was the simplest trick. But it made CoinDesk appear like a very large media company because we were cited all over the place. No one really knew we were like 4 or 5 people with people writing in pen names and knocking articles out to sort of fluff up how much of a serious news entity we were, although we were serious, and those are some of the fondest memories of my time in the industry. Those were great, that we were all packed into a little WeWork in Manhattan and cranking out material, right? Cranking out content. And Bitcoin was $200 or something crazy like that. Nobody gave a shit about us. And it was a lot of fun. So all this is going on, and we have the BPI. So I joined Kraken, and I'm still thinking in terms of how we get attention and how we get referenced and how we get people to look at us, right? Like, I'm still coming from that media point of view. So exchanges do see themselves as media entities now. Binance is one of the most visited websites in the world, and they definitely have a content strategy. All the big exchanges do. You see Coinbase, they know that they are now similar to media machines and have to control content and push out content, which is quasi-marketing, right? So I'm working for the exchange, and I'm saying, well, this election might not be clean. Therefore, the thing that's going to matter in the days after the election is not the arguing over lawyers, not the, what did that ballot say, and analysts. I said they're going to be looking for easy, lazy data points. And I said, if there isn't a winner declared on whatever it was, November 3rd, November 4th, 2020, then prediction markets, right? So here's the beginning of the synchronicity. Prediction markets. The I-ching is a prediction machine, right? So the prediction markets, I had a look, and it was this little exchange, which I was already covering, FTX, that had the only prediction market. Well, there was another one, I-predict or something, but this one was the more interesting for us because it was a crypto exchange, and that's what I was looking at competitors. And I said, well, they have this product. And I said, there's no volume. Nobody's using it, right? So people are like, well, you're presenting this to business people and the thing. I say, well, there's no upside for volume and all that. Why should we be interested? Not many people are interested in betting on elections. And I made the case that, well, if it's a hung election, they're going to start cranking this data point and they're going to report on it. So you'll just get amplified and people will know you're in the middle of the game and all those things. So we didn't end up doing it, right? So I understand why we wouldn't do it. It wasn't that great of an idea, and we didn't really know where the election was heading. I was mostly just speculating. Right? I was mostly just speculating. Let's go to the election, right? So now election day comes. We find out on election day that SBF is the largest donor to the Biden campaign outside of America in the world. He donated $3.5 million. He ended up donating $50 million to Democrat causes over the last 2 years. So election day 2020, we find out he's Biden's biggest donor. But then something else amazing happens. Something else amazing, right? And we're starting to get into the synchronicity. All coincidence, right? I'm just mentioning coincidences here and stuff like that. So you put them together. I'm mentioning the coincidences in order, right? I'm studying prediction markets. I think they're going to be a good media vehicle to make money and say that they will be a reference point in a post-election scenario where no one knows what's going on, fog of war, right? SBF is the largest donor to the Biden campaign in 2020. What happens in the week after the election? Of course, as I predicted, we have 2 presidents, right? No one knows what's going on. Everybody's fighting, but the media is now amplifying one signal: the FTX prediction markets. They're going on and on about it, right? Look what the dispassionate Wall Street people think. They're not in it for anyone. They just want money, right? Oh, and it's even. It's very credible. It's very credible. It's just Wall Street dispassionate, not sentimental people. These are non-sentimental people. They're not in the bag for anyone. That's what everyone's saying. Look at them, right? They're putting on every news show. Every news show is quoting the FTX prediction markets. A few days pass, it looks even, it looks even. Remember, I know there's no volume on this thing, right? There's no volume. A couple days pass, and all of a sudden, it slides one way. I don't know who put the trades in. I don't know anything about it. I've never done any forensic analysis, but all of a sudden, it gave a clear answer, right? And within no time, the mainstream media pointed to this prediction market and said, proof, the non-sentimental people have already decided who won the election. And it became a citable reason. We talk a lot about cognitive closure. We talk a lot about psychological framing in this show, right? How you persuade someone in order to think something. So this became a logical, made sense reason to shut it down. So within days in 2020, people just cited the prediction market and went with it. But the dispassionate people said, don't worry about it. The dispassionate people said, they think this is the way it went. Therefore, it's good enough, right? So let's just get over what happened in 2020. I accepted Biden as the president immediately, right? I like having a dementia guy as president. I think as a Bitcoiner, remember, my political philosophy is the following. I loved Donald Trump the first term. I love the new dementia guy much more, much more. I want 4 more years of Biden. Remember that. It's 4 more years on this show. 4 more years. Biden, Biden, Biden. 6 more years of Biden. I can't think of a better thing for Bitcoin, right? It's just a great symbol for the dollar to have this guy in charge and all that. So just remember that's where I'm coming from. So I accept the results immediately, right? Now, this prediction market ends up being a huge media boon for FTX. No one even heard of them before 2020. And all of a sudden, just like CoinDesk and the price of Bitcoin got cited around the world. So all of a sudden, everyone knows the FTX prediction market on the presidential election. Everybody knows about it, right? Everybody. So now here's the beautiful synchronicity. This fella SBF spends 2 years, king of the world, right? He's got Tom Brady in his cap table. He's got Giselle coming to the Bahamas and doing a conference with them. He gets Bill Clinton and he gets Tony Blair and he gets all this stuff going on, right? Now, what happens next? Well, I don't know if you guys knew this, but about 3 weeks ago, just 3 weeks ago, right? The CFTC, out of nowhere, right? Out of nowhere. A few days ago, the CFTC banned political prediction markets in America. What was the reason? Does anyone know the reason? Let me read it. There's no reason. None. They gave 0 reason for shutting down American prediction markets. None. No one said why. No one said how. Nobody. The CFTC banned prediction markets without an explanation. If they had an explanation, I'm okay. You just explain why, right? Give me a reason. I don't have to agree with the reason. Just give me a reason. I want to know. Give me the reason, right? But the minute they don't give you a reason, you can assume. You can just assume. You don't need permission. You can assume corruption. It has to be. If there was a reason to ban prediction markets, which you could have just said it exactly as I just mentioned, right? You could have said, well, it had a bit too much of a role in the last election. This was a very illiquid market, and in the end was used to cite election turnout and this dispassionate user. I would accept that, honestly. If someone would have come out and said that, I would have just let it go. No problem, right? But that's not what happened. The CFTC banned prediction markets 3 weeks ago. Not a month ago, not a year ago, not right after the election. They did it in anticipation of this election. Just 3 weeks ago. Now, what else was happening 3 weeks ago? Well, 3 weeks ago, SBF, right, decided that he would cozy up to the CFTC and was working with them on the Digital Commodity Consumer Protection Act. Do you know the DCCPA? You shouldn't know it if you're a Bitcoiner because it doesn't mean shit to us. But this was a framework to regulate cryptocurrency in America by empowering the CFTC, the same people who banned prediction markets, to have jurisdiction on everything we did. And if you saw some of the debate, this was where SBF was starting to angle that running a node made you a broker dealer, all this kind of bullshit, right? And, forget about what happened for a second with the Binance thing. 3 weeks ago, when the prediction markets were getting banned, SBF had Eric Voorhees on his ass telling him he's an idiot for the whole plan that he has to go cozy up with the CFTC. And I predicted right there, I predicted the day he wrote his first note about what we should do with the DCCPA and all that shit. I said to someone in the industry, who I told them yesterday, look what I predicted. When that happened 3 weeks ago, I said, SBF is done. He's not going to make it. It's over. He's over. He's done. Right? And he said, come on. I said, no, don't plan on him for anything. It's over. I said, he's finished. He's finished. Right? Now, my prediction was because he had gone so far afield of what anyone thought was acceptable in the industry that people in the industry were going to slit his throat. I mean, metaphorically, of course, right? We're very anti-violence. So here's what, and so here's the synchronicity part. The whole thing happens because of elections, right? The whole thing. His election 2020 prediction market helped build the whole company. His donations to the Biden administration ended up creating a situation where we don't know what his $50 million bought. We do know that every commissioner at the CFTC was appointed by Biden. They're all 2022 vintage. They're all from this administration, all 5 of them, every one of them, right? They banned prediction markets. On whose authority, on whose direction, we don't know. But suddenly, SBF has a traitorous plan for them to regulate crypto assets, right? All this nonsense. And of course, industry people came out and said, what the F are you doing? This doesn't work for anybody, right? So here's some reporting. So put this stuff together. Amazing. Here's the I-ching part and the synchronicity part. It is 2 years to the day. It's election day again. So imagine the story of your life is everything goes right for you in 2020. You're the biggest donor to a candidate who wins the election. You end up having a shit ton of sway in the one major regulatory body. Oh, let me add one more piece to this. There's one more important piece. I'm not making any connections. I don't know if these are connected. I don't know, right? This is total speculation. This is complete hearsay that I'm about to offer you. Complete and total speculation, right? But who was arrested by the DOJ under CFTC provisions at the same time that all this was going to? Can anyone remember? Can anyone remember who was indicted in, let me see if we have it in the comments. Who was indicted in the same period by actionable CFTC provisions? And he wasn't in America. And he had a product that was quite similar. One would even say the inspiration for FTX's original product, which is the 100x leverage BitMEX platform. Who was arrested when all this was going on? It was Arthur Hayes. What did SBF invent? The 101x leverage casino machine, right? BitMEX created the perp swap and the 100x machine. Arthur Hayes. Justin has the answer. It's Arthur Hayes, right? So Arthur Hayes, I'm not making any connections. Remember that. This is all just synchronicity. I'm not making any connections, right? None. Synchronicity. Arthur Hayes is arrested for doing the same thing. The same thing. It's the same product. It's the same scam, right? Arthur was just open about it. They're both based in Hong Kong at the time because we hadn't lost Hong Kong yet to FATF and the communists, right? It was still a capitalist place, right? So yeah, so BitMEX launched the 50x FTD swap contract yesterday morning, of course, because these are not friendly people. And I'll tell you what happened. This is from Daniel Kuhn from CoinDesk, who's done great reporting on all this stuff. I've spoken to some of these people and it's great, right? So here's just a piece, right? A piece. So he goes on about how he was a trader. I don't mean a traitor. I mean a trader, right? A trader, traitor, a trader. Talking about how he was not really into the tech, not really into the revolution, not really here for that stuff, right? And so here's Daniel's understanding. Now remember, this is exactly what I predicted to that person a few weeks ago about why he would be done. Instead, SBF, a political mega donor who has spent $50 million during the past US election cycle, has used his influence to push for regulations that ruffled his customers and competitors' feathers. He was a vocal proponent of the DCCPA bill that would create a brokerage-like licensing system for decentralized finance and argued against financial privacy. What he said in public, that's what he said in public. Here's the important part. Right? Here's everything you need to know about what happened yesterday. Here's everything you need to know. That's what he said in public. For CZ, the bigger concern was what was said behind closed doors. We won't, this is a quote from CZ, we won't support people who lobby against other industry players behind their backs, the CEO of Binance tweeted this weekend. This was CZ's attempt at being transparent, he said, explaining a large transaction of FTT tokens to Binance that were made the day before. He announced Binance would be selling these tokens into the open market and basically crushed it. It's over. So this, now, we don't fat shame on this show. We don't, right? We have empathy for everyone struggling with whatever addiction they have, whatever problem they have. You know, we feel blessed and lucky that we don't have that particular problem, but we do not have this attitude that you're unhealthy because you're not disciplined enough and you're just not tough enough and all that, right? I don't believe any of that stuff, right? None of it. So I want you to know that I'm not interested in any type of mocking people because of their weight or anything like that, right? None of it. But SBF, as a symbol for the industry, right? As a symbol for the industry, was not a good look. It was not, you know, I prefer Arthur Hayes and his fitness to SBF any day, right? That's what I would prefer, just because I think it's a better positive image and energetic and all these things. Now, SBF, imagine you live 2 years of your life like a fish out of water. Like, did he look like in place on stage with Giselle? Like, I liked the contrast. I thought it was cool, I guess. But, you know, he spent 2 years, the top of the world, on election day. And it was an election that made him 2 years earlier. He's toast. He's toast. Right, it's over. It's done. He's finished. He's never coming back. And I think having him out of the way is good in many levels, right? Just from a connotation of him and his appearance, I thought was always bad for the industry, especially if he's the person speaking for it, right? You know, like he used to wear diapers and stuff, you know, diapers when he would be trading and report, and, you know, there's pictures of diapers. Like, what are we talking about here, right? What are we talking about? My problem always was that this fella was doing the opposite of what we wanted. We want to reduce the complexity to participate in the modern world. He was one of these guys who said, okay, well, normal traders who have a Series 7 license and an IQ of 130, well, that's not enough. Now you have to be a computer science engineer on top of that and understand how to run nodes and run MEV, right? The miner extracted value, this crazy thing that's going to end Ethereum. There's no doubt. Did you know that yesterday, Up Only, you know, Kobe, that podcast? So he had, what's that guy from Korea? Do Kwon, right? The president Do Kwon, and Martin Shkreli, you know, Martin Shkreli, the pharma bro or whatever that they threw in jail. So they jumped on the pod to talk about SBF. And Martin Shkreli said MEV is too gross and icky for him. And that's what all these people think is the future, right? That's what all these people who trade nonstop and think all that matters is risk and leverage and all these crazy things believe. You know, our goal here is that the best and brightest stop going to Wall Street and stop working in finance and stop upping the skill level and complexity level to participate in that whole world, right? We want the best and brightest to go be craftspeople again. That's what Bitcoiners want on a whole, right? We want the best and brightest to go make chairs that are beautiful and last and show craftsmanship and expertise and all those things. We're not going to get it in a world where we're run by these ridiculous traders and their hyper sophisticated financial engineering, which is just bullshit on top of bullshit on top of bullshit. Because in the end, you get what we have, right? You get these prediction markets that are basically impossible to participate in, because the market just won't allow it. It won't allow it, right? The regulators won't allow it. And we can see from this, once again, I'm not making there are no direct cause and effects here. I'm just telling you that this fella had a prediction market. He was the biggest political donor. The prediction market was used to help settle the election. 2 years later, he's working with the regulator to make rules. And then on election day, he's finished. I mean, you can't write this stuff. You can't write it. It's too cool. It's too cool. So what do we take for all that? Well, look, we have elections in the United States, and nobody knows the results, right? There's all kinds of confusion, and who knows what's up, who knows what's going on, and things might look bad here or there. And Bitcoin is suffering in the price in the markets today, and people are more stressed than ever about politics, because yesterday was as flat, no answery result as you could possibly get, right? Nobody won. It was like a split decision on technicalities, right? So nothing's changing. Everything's going to be the same, it looks like. But as we know, strange things can happen, right? When synchronicity is involved. And what might look like a confusing time, I think, is actually the beginning of settling into a lot more clarity. So that's what I think. That's what I think. So we're not going to have as long of a show today, guys. Sorry about that. I've got to head back to Vermont. I'm heading back to Vermont today. So today's a short episode. So how's everyone feeling? How's everyone feeling? Do a live divination. Ask the Oracle about Bitcoin. Yeah, let me learn about how to do that first. I don't have the sticks, right? I don't have the sticks. So, but it would be a good idea. I'm a fan. I'm a big fan of the I-ching, and what other? It's referenced in a few different art forms now, and I think it's going to be, I think it's going to continue to be relevant, right? It like they said thousands of years ago, it explains the whole world. And as we build our own worlds with digital technology, we realize that it's identical, right? That the I-ching was a really valuable tool. And remember, it is, so, I mean, there's the other coincidence that I didn't even bring up, right? Like, the I-ching is a prediction machine, and now the prediction markets are what we're talking about, right? So it's prediction markets, which are now banned, but the prediction machine tells us it's cool. We're going to win. We're going to win. We're going to win, Not much longer. So yeah, Dex loves life. Great as all. Thanks, guys. Thanks, guys. Safe travels. Thanks, Shane. I appreciate it. All right, guys.